knows very clearly all of his... In other words, if you want to look at it in psychological terms, all of your defense mechanisms are suddenly removed. Your projection, your denial, all of these psychological mechanisms that we've used very well in this world to justify our actions are taken away from us. And it says in Surah Al-Qaf that on that day the veil is removed from your eyes and your eyesight is piercing. So you will see things very clear. And there's an idea that we all know in truth if we will reflect what we're up to. So each person is taken into account. And the Prophet Muhammad said that every people will be behind their prophet. So the people of Moses will be behind Moses, the people of Jesus behind Jesus, the people of Muhammad behind Muhammad, the people of Karl Marx behind Karl Marx. Everybody's going to be behind their imam, the one they took as their example in this world. And it's interesting because the Quran says that the oppressed will say to the oppressors, you got us here. And the oppressors will say, we didn't do anything, you followed us. And so there's this kind of conflict between them. And each one will say, I don't want anything to do with you in the next world. So there's an idea of really everybody awakens to the truth of their own souls, to the truth of their own self. And then it's said that there is, after the reckoning, there's the weighing in the balance. Once everything has been shown, then actions are put into scales. And the scholars say Allah knows best what their reality. And if the right actions outweigh the bad, then you are given a book in your right hand, and it's the book of your actions. And if the wrong actions outweigh, then you're given a book in your left hand. At that point, then you go to what is called a sirat, which is the plain. It is a bridge over which the valley of Jahannam is. And the bridge in the tradition says that it's more piercing, it's more sharp than a sword. And everybody will have to go across this bridge, everyone. And there are angels on the bridge that shout to people. And the Prophet Muhammad said that there are people that will go like light. They'll go the speed of light across the bridge. He said, kabak, like a lightning that go right across it. There's other people, he said, that will go like a wind. There's other people, he said, that will go running. There's other people that will go walking. There's other people that will go crawling. And then there's other people that will not make it across into the pit. And then at the other side of the sirat, there's what's called a HUhn. And the HUhn is a huge basin, and according to the tradition, anyone who drinks from it will never have thirst after that. And there is also a tradition that on that day, the death is brought before everybody in the form of a lamb and is slaughtered. And so there's no death after that.
The ones that don't make it across the very thirsting.
Thirsting. That's one of the... See, the idea is that only God can quench the thirst. And if one was attempting to quench the thirst in this world by other than God, then they failed in what their task was, which was to be quenched through closeness and not distance. So it goes back to this idea of rahmah, mercy, and wrath, that you bring wrath upon yourself. That's really the idea, that God is not punishing people to punish them. That people literally take themselves to their final destinies. That's very strong in the tradition. Now, some people will not abide in, there are people that leave it. There's an interesting tradition. I mean, this is just a story. But there's an interesting tradition because the Prophet Muhammad said, how people die, that's how they're raised up, and how they're raised up is how they're judged. And there's a story of a woman, they tell that she never did one kind deed, except once she was going into her house and a carrot dropped, and a cat came and took the carrot. And this is based on a hadith that the Prophet said there will be people punished because they did not feed animals that were in their responsibility, that they're actually punished for that. It's like a responsibility. And so this person was going to go get the carrot, and they just decided, no, I'll let the cat have it. And so they're in the pit of fire, and a carrot comes down. And so they hold on to the carrot, and they start getting pulled up out of the fire on this carrot. But then she looks down, and there's other people coming out holding on to her. So before you know it, there's a whole string of people getting pulled out of the fire because of this one carrot. And then she starts saying, no, this is my carrot. And she slips and falls back in. So it's just giving you an idea of the people, how they are in this world. It's going to be confirmed in the next world with their miserliness. Now there is a hadith that a prostitute, it's a sahih hadith, that a prostitute went to a well and got water up from the well. And she saw a thirsty dog. And she said, this dog is thirsty like I am. So she put her shoe down and brought water up and quenched the thirst of the dog. And the Prophet said for that she was forgiven and given paradise. There was another tradition that says that a man, he used to loan money, and he would tell his agents, go out and ask to be repaid. And if they don't have the money, tell them not to worry about it. And so the Prophet said that when that man is brought before God, God says, I'm more generous than this man in forgiving his debtors. And he forgives him. So if you look in the Islamic tradition, there's very, very strong emphasis on forgiveness and rahmah. But there's also an emphasis on wrath. There's a balance here. Even though the Muslims say God's rahmah is over his wrath. And there's a tradition that says that God's mercy is 99 parts. And only one part did he send down to the earth, and by that part of mercy, a mother shows mercy to her child. The mare raises its leg from stepping on the foal. So the idea is that all of the mercy in this world that we see is only one small portion of the mercy of God. So there is a strong emphasis on God's mercy. But there's also a strong emphasis on the wrath.
What happens about, say, your citizenship in the country causes problems, pollution, death?
Right.
Would it be part of that citizenship?
I think there's definitely accountability on all levels. Muslims believe in accountability. That complacency is, the Prophet said, being silent about something is showing contentment with it. So if you're silent about a thing, it means that you're complicit in the action. So unless to speak out against it would endanger your life. So there is an idea that people who feel that I can't, if I speak out, they're going to kill me or something like that, they're forgiven. Although the Prophet said the greatest jihad is to speak the truth in front of an unjust ruler. That is the greatest jihad. So there is definitely an idea of responsibility in one's actions and in what does. And politics is a problem. Henry Thoreau, he got arrested for not paying his taxes because he felt, government supports slavery. He didn't want to support a government. And they say that Emerson went there, visited him in the jail, and he said, Henry, what are you doing in there? And Henry said, the question is, what are you doing out there? That we do have a social responsibility.
But on, I think, mentioned suicide.
Yes. And I'll tell you something really interesting about that. There's a book called Life After Life by Raymond Moody, and there's a section in there about suicide in which he mentions a woman who committed suicide. She was actually declared dead, but then she was brought back to life after blood transfusion. And he interviewed her and asked her what happened. She said she found herself doing it over and over again. And the hadith, according to the Prophet Muhammad, said if anyone who commits suicide will continue to do that with the same intensity until the day of judgment. Although it is not considered a kufr. In other words, the person is not. If a Muslim commits suicide, they're still Muslim. They're buried as a Muslim. But it's one of the worst things that you can do. No, absolutely. If somebody is anybody who is out of their mind is not held to account by Sharia. Half the 20th century.
You're out of their mind, you need it for decision.
No. In other words, if somebody was clinically depressed to the point where they were non-functional. You know, the accountability, it's hard for the accountability to be, you know, I mean, those things, it's just difficult. They're gray areas. But the idea is that if they really are not functioning, you know, that accountability is based on sound intellect, that is part of accountability. And this, again, like in Islam, you have somebody who's all their life they've been punished. You know, since the time they were born, beaten as a child and all these things. They become sociopathic. Or from an Islam point of view, when they reach adulthood, they're accountable. In real terms, we would say, Allahu A'lam, what's going to happen on the Day of Judgment. Because the Prophet said many parents will be taken to account for what they did to their children. See? Because it is the parents' response. It's a trust. That's why parenthood is so strong in Islam. You know, it's because it's a divine trust. Children are a trust in the hands of the parents. And if they betray the trust, then they can destroy the children.
If a child dies before puberty, do they go right to heaven?
According to the tradition, Abraham takes care of the children who die. The children whose parents are for paradise, Abraham takes care of those children. It's Haban. It's called Haban. He can't forgive. Yeah, it's not like, you know, I mean, in the Christian tradition, there's some verses that would indicate, like Jesus said, go and sin no more, you know, for you're forgiven. And that was seen as kind of a blasphemy to the Jews. From the Muslim point of view, they would say, Allahu A'lam, if that is a true account of Jesus, they would say that is not Jesus forgiving, but rather God revealing to him that the woman's actions were forgiven. Because the Prophet did tell people they were forgiven. But he does not forgive. The Prophet does not absolve people's sins. It is God alone who forgives. The Prophet is seen as a human being. He's a man. He does not have divine... he is a human being like the rest of us in his human nature, but not like the rest of us in that he's a prophet. So some of them said, you know, a ruby is a rock, but it's not like other rocks. It's a mineral, but it's not like other minerals.
I've been a tough time trying to reconcile the issue of slandering a prophet with equal in death sentence is on the law with some of the things you just said, i.e. that prophets are merely men. And also something else that I think I've heard in my deep or granted, that people find God in their own time. You know, it might be 16 for this person, maybe 40 for his age. So how, if that's true?
Well, there would be no, because if you slander another human being, you're whipped in Islam. In other words, if I accuse somebody in here of adultery, the Islamic punishment is that I'm whipped, because that is prohibited to do that. And there's very severe consequences for it because of its impact on society. If you do something to a prophet, it's very serious, with the idea that the prophets are impeccable in their character, that they are people that have only brought good for human beings. And if you do want to say something about them, then you say it not in the public space, in the private space. In other words, that's again between you and God. But if you bring that out into the public space, then it creates a type of tension in the society that is very serious.
I'd like to add to that, that many of the people were persecuted.
He forgave them.
Absolutely physically persecuted.
Yeah, he forgave them.
Became Muslims themselves.
And he forgave them. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, if it was a non-Muslim who did it, see, it's very different. If it's a non-Muslim who did it, it goes under a different category than a Muslim did it. See what I mean? In other words, this law relates to Muslims who say bad things about the Prophet.
You reconcile and understand what you said before about the entire Sharia being placed in an Islamic setting. It's a pretty important piece of you to understand how that can possibly be a reality. I mean, it's not like someone was here who last thing was talking and we a lot of punishment versus Islamic.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So that is not hold for non-Islamic people.
No, it's prohibited in Islamic law for a person to do that, to blaspheme any prophet, right? But for a Muslim, it's a death penalty. For a non-Muslim, they are tried, and if they become Muslim,